What's up, guys? It's Talon. Today I have a complete jungle guide for you where we're going to go over everything from like the pre-game to early, mid, and late game. So starting off, why should you listen to me for jungle? Well, I've reached Challenger solo queue on jungle a couple seasons ago. I've reached Challenger on every role apart from support, where I've still reached Grandmaster 75 marks. So I have a general understanding of every role to a Challenger level pretty much. And specifically for jungle, I did play it only solo queue, so I feel like I'm even better at that role specifically. And again, this season, I've also been playing a lot of jungle. I'm currently Grandmaster playing mostly jungle. So those are the main reasons I feel like you could listen to me and I can provide you some value. Anyways, let's get right into the video. So starting off with some of the pre-game information that you need to know before starting off playing jungle. So first off is understanding the different types of champions that you can be played in jungle. So there's many different types of champions, from bruisers to tanks to you can play assassins, you can play AD carries, you can play so many different champions in jungle. But ultimately what it boils down to is really two main things. So it's the difference between a farming versus a ganking jungler, and then the difference between a late game versus an early game jungler. So we'll get into some examples of that now. So starting off with early game ganking junglers. These are junglers who have good clear speeds, which allows them to frequently gank, as well as good mobility and CC to also gank people. So here you see in this situation, I'm asking my duo, did the set flash? He says yes, and as an early game ganking jungler, I immediately decide, well then I want to gank someone because they don't have a flash. A champion like Jarvan can do this very well, and we're going to see in a second that I'm going to do exactly this. I'm going to go into the lane, I'm going to use my mobility and my CC to easily set up a gank on someone who already has no flash, getting an easy kill. Now on the other end of the spectrum, we have late game carry junglers. These junglers have slower clear speeds in the early game and are much more focused on farming up so that they can be stronger in later parts of the game. They are often assassins or AD carries, champions like Diana, champions like Evelynn, champions like if you like playing Kai'Sa jungle or Twitch jungle. All of these champions will typically start on Krugs or start on one side of the map, clear that entire side of the map, and then after clearing that side of the map, go to the other side of the map and continue clearing their camps. They won't look for ganks as frequently due to their slower clear speed, making them have to farm more often, as well as their lack of really good gank setup. Now, the last note on champion pool is that despite some champions being gankers or farmers, every champion is kind of on a spectrum. So some champions are very, very heavily focused on ganking. Others can gank and farm well. So just because your champion generally wants to gank or farm does not mean that you always have to do that. Sometimes you're able to change your decision making based on the specific game and the specific scenario that you find yourself in. So one of the most important things to understand in jungle before you jump into jungle is your champion smite combo. This basically means what abilities do you combo with your champion to deal maximum damage to objectives. With Jarvan, you're going to see that I'm going to use my third ability, first ability, and then ultimate and combo it all together to steal this Elder Dragon. Understanding this with your champion and what the optimal smite combo is will allow you to secure and steal many more objectives. The next important thing to do in the pregame is looking at your lane matchups and deciding where you want to initially path. There are many things to take into account, but the biggest thing to worry about is pathing towards winning lanes. In this situation, Fiora Riven is about an even lane, and Lucian Nautilus versus Caitlyn Thresh is roughly even. However, Caitlyn Thresh do have the advantage. Despite this, I decide I want to path towards my Lucian Nautilus in this game, and there's a couple factors that help me decide this. First of all, my Lucian Nautilus are on the bottom side of the map in this specific game, and that means that Camille likely won't gank because I am aware that Camille's typical pathing is clearing her entire red side, so she won't be on the blue side of the map early on, and she also doesn't have a lot of gank pressure until level 3. Now, additionally, Nautilus has great gank setup, being an engaged support with his hook and with his flash and root. And Thresh is similarly a champion that engages often, so I expect fighting to happen early on in this game. So despite the fact that this is a slightly losing matchup for Lucian Nautilus, I know that because of the enemy jungler not being good at ganking, whereas me, I'm a very good ganker, and or not a very good ganker, but a pretty good ganker, and I have that gank set up on the Nautilus, I decide to path towards them. Other important things to understand, apart from pathing towards winning lanes, are understanding how the mid matchups go and knowing if you'll get prio or not. Physically is roughly, like either one could win that, so I'm not entirely sure whether or not I'll have lane priority. But if I can, I typically want to path towards a way where I'll have my mid lane priority and another lane's priority so that I can pressure invades or pressure scuttle crab or other things like that. Okay guys, so as important as it is to path towards winning lane matchups, it's equally as important to understand your champion's best gank timers and their strengths and weaknesses as well. For example, here on Vi, I'm pathing towards top side because I know that I can easily get level 4 before the first Scuttle Crab spawns. So even though Gwen Wukong is losing for Gwen, I'm okay with pathing towards here simply because it will be more beneficial for my champion. So you can see here, I'm clearing all of these camps and getting to Scuttle Crab right when it spawns, being level 4 and having that advantage. And now after that, since I end up having lane priority, I do end up looking for a possible gank, but I don't waste too much time. And for Vi specifically, what this allows me to do by clearing every camp except my Krugs is go for a quick topside gank, immediately back, go bot lane, and get level 5 like you're going to see here off of this camp. Now I switch up because in this specific scenario, I see a fight going on in mid lane, but the overall decision making there was to get level 5 off my Krugs and be able to impact 2 lanes in a very short period of time. Now I end up going here and getting the kill onto the Jarvan, and then right after that getting level 5, using that level 5 to rotate and gank a Wukong and get multiple kills in the lane. So just understanding that your champion's strengths and your champion's best gank timers are important to play around, and you don't always want to lose that opportunity just because you want to path towards a certain lane. Okay guys, so I talked about deciding on kind of your pathing and which lanes you want to path towards. Now I want to talk about the actual clear itself. So initially, when you are clearing small camps, make sure that you clear them by targeting the highest health monster. That way, you're as a melee champion, you'll target the small ones as well with your cleaving auto attack. So targeting the biggest one will allow you to clear them the fastest. Also, make sure that you are kiting the camps towards the next camp you want to clear. You see every time that I auto attack the red buff, I also bring it closer to the next camp. That way I'm wasting minimal amounts of time. And lastly, make sure you use your smite on camps as soon as they get close to 600 HP. So if they are slightly lower than 600 HP or exactly at 600 HP, you want to smite them to maximize the use of your smite. You don't want to smite before because that might cause it to get stolen, so you only want to use the smite once it's at 600 or lower, but you want to make sure you use it as close to 600 as possible. And obviously, lastly, once your smite is used 3 times, it will upgrade and now do 800 damage and also slow people and allow you to target other people with it. This is very important because it means that you want to use 3 smites as quick as possible. Typically, when you're clearing, you want to use 2 smites on 2 of the camps that you clear, and then you're going to use your 3rd smite on a Scuttle Crab most often, like you saw here. So that's about it for the initial first clear. Let's get into the next part. Okay guys, so I'm just going to talk a little bit more about jungle pathing, and I have a full video on my channel about jungle pathing if you're interested in learning more. But the last little note I wanted to make is that it is important to try to clear the entire side of a jungle at once. So typically as a jungler on your first clear, if you can, it's very, very nice to have an entire jungle side cleared. Now why is this? It's because then those jungle camps will respawn at a similar time, making it easier to farm them in succession quicker because the similar side camps will be spawning at a similar time. So here on Vi again, you're seeing I'm doing the same thing where I'm clearing 2 camps on the red side and then I clear all 3 blue side camps. This way, most of my red side camps will spawn at a similar time and my blue side camps will also spawn at a similar time. Now it's important to note that buffs, both the blue buff and the red buff, take longer to spawn, so this is less true for them and more just true for the small camps. However, it's still nice to farm your buffs since they're just right in the area at a similar time anyways. Okay guys, so we talked about farming and how to decide on your pathing. Now let's talk about ganking and what makes a good gank. So typically the main things you want to look for in a gank is first of all the health of the person you're trying to gank. Obviously the lower they are, the easier the gank will be to work out. Secondly, you want to look at the wave position. If the enemy, like in this scenario, has a bigger wave than your teammate's wave, that means that they will feel pressured to go forward and trade to push the wave so that it crashes under the tower. Because if they do not do that, then they will be stuck losing minions because their minions will kill your teammate's minions. So for that reason, this gank worked out very, very well for me, as we saw here. The last important thing to note is gank setup from both your laner and your own ganks. So for example, Jarvan has a lot of mobility and CC, so he's a very good ganker. Now, on the other hand, Pantheon has a very nice stun, which allows him to follow up on ganks extremely well. And then lastly is the enemy champion's avoidance of ganks. So how can they avoid them? Of course, if the enemy has flash, they're more likely to avoid it. In this scenario, the only way that the Yasuo can escape apart from his flash is dashing away through the minions, meaning once he's past the minions, I'm no longer worried about him escaping. So thinking about all of those factors is most important when deciding on whether or not to gank. And the last important thing is, of course, vision, which is why if you can gank with your sweeper, that's typically best, because then you can be notified of whether or not they have vision. Now, don't be scared if they do have vision, but you're sweeping it. Rather than clearing the ward, walk straight over the ward and go for the gank, because they will not usually realize it quick enough, or they won't see because the ward will be disabled while you're sweeping it. Okay, so any jungle player will often have a problem with deciding between farming versus ganking in many scenarios. I've made a full video on my channel for this if you're interested in learning more, but the simple answer is just farming is more efficient when it will get you more gold than a gank will, or depending on how likely the gank is, you have to take that into account as well. So let's say that you think a gank is roughly 50% chance of working out, and that gank will result in a 300 gold because of a kill, and it'll also give you a little bit of gold for the assist to your teammate. Whereas farming would give you a guaranteed 300 gold if you say farm 2 camps. So you have to take into account the fact that one is guaranteed and one isn't, and then kind of decide from there whether or not you feel it's worth it to go for the gank. Additionally, ganking or just fighting with your team is more beneficial when an objective is spawning soon or when an objective is currently up. Objectives are really the number one thing that you want to be paying attention to as a jungler, so anytime that you're able to get an objective or you're able to fight over one, you're going to want to be doing that in most cases. Whereas when there is no objective and there is no real thing to fight over, that's when you're kind of okay with giving up a potential fight and maybe letting your teammates die in order to value farming and getting yourself stronger for that next objective. Okay, so next up we're going to talk about invading. So there's two kind of like ways that I would classify invading, and there's early game invades and then there's invading in later parts of the game. In the early game, the typical best times to invade are when you have lane priority in multiple lanes so that you can easily have access to the invade, and also make sure you're pinging so your teammates are aware. So for example, if my mid laner is pushing up in his lane and has the advantage, and my bot lane also has their advantage, well then maybe I might want to look and take their blue buff in that scenario if I believe that my jungler is a stronger jungler early game than theirs. So invading on an Evelynn early game as a Wukong, for example, is great. Now the other type of invade is late game invades or mid game invades, and typically the time that you're going to invade in the later parts of the game is simply when you win a fight. So after winning a dragon fight, getting the Baron, doing anything like this, you're going to want to take advantage of that time and use it to take enemy jungle, because taking enemy jungle is significantly more valuable than taking your own jungle, because you're denying that those jungle camps from the enemy jungler at the same time as providing yourself with the gold from getting them. Now, kind of one other way where you can invade is typically when you're trading objectives or when the enemy is taking an objective. So if you are behind in a game, or if you're just simply trading herald for dragon or dragon for herald, after you get that dragon or that herald, or when the enemy is on the objective, if you are behind, that is another great time to invade the enemy champion. The reason for this is because they'll be stuck on one side of the map, giving you ample time to take their jungle without being worried of them killing you or anything like that. Okay guys, so as I've said with a lot of these topics, I have a more deep video on Herald versus Dragon, but for this video's sake, I'll go over it again. So we're going to talk about first objectives and deciding on which one to go for. So the simple answer is you want to go for the objective that plays towards your stronger lane. When my top laner is doing really well, I'll play for Herald. When my dual lane is doing really well, I'll play for Dragon more often than not. The other important thing to take into account is when you're losing every side of the map, you want to go for simply the opposite objective as the opponents. Now, honestly, people go for Dragon more often than they go for Herald, so it's a better bet to go for the Herald if the enemy is not going for that. The benefits of the Herald are a stronger early game boost, because you get that extra gold, and that gold is infinitely more valuable than the bonus that you get from the Dragon. On the other side of things, Dragon is better scaling, because if you stack 2 or 3 dragons, you get amplified buffs where all of them just all increase at the same time, so you just get more value the later on in the game that you get from those dragons. Lastly, if you're super behind on every aspect, again, you just go for the other objective, but if you're super ahead in every way, then you want to try to go for the same objective as the opponents and force a fight if you can. So if you're able to, figure out where they are going, then you can try to contest them on that. However, there's one important thing to note. Say that everyone on the enemy team You know that enemy top laner rotated to dragon and you want to contest enemy on dragon, but your top laner unfortunately isn't being very smart and they're staying on their lane. Well, in this scenario, you are going to want to just stay and go for the herald, because if you do fight a 4v5, you're of course going to lose that. So sometimes being okay with giving up these objectives or going for the objective you don't necessarily want to go for simply because of your teammates' poor decision making is okay. Okay guys, so now moving on to the mid game and what we want to do in the mid game. Initially talking again about farming versus ganking in the mid lane and basically what you want to do in between the first dragon and the second dragon. So in between first and second dragon, your only goal is to get yourself and your team stronger before rotating and fighting this dragon. You're nearly always going to want to fight this dragon, so before that you need to be as strong as possible. That means not wasting our ultimate a minute before the objective so that we don't have it, not wasting our flash right before the objective, making sure we have all of these tools for the objective fight once the next dragon spawns so that we are as strong as possible. Additionally, valuing gold and getting yourself and your teammates stronger over everything else before this objective. That means not taking fights that you think aren't winning or not helping your teammates with stupid fights if you see them going for stupid fights, because if your teammates die but no objective is up, you don't actually lose that much. So in these scenarios where you see bad fights that you don't think you should go for, you should value your farming instead. Now, of course, if you see a fight that looks very winning, you want to help your team with that because that will again get you stronger for the next objective. Just making sure that every decision you make in this mid-game scenario between the first dragon and the next dragon is all about valuing, again, getting stronger and being at a maximum strength for that next dragon fight. Okay, so on the topic of the second dragon and even the third dragon, there are cases where you can give this up. You just have to make sure you're gaining something on the other side, and you also have to be aware of what you're giving up. So for example, if you lose the first dragon, it's less likely that you want to give up the second dragon because that's going to be a much bigger buff for the opponents. However, giving up 2 dragons is not the end of the world, and sometimes still the correct case. Even 3 dragons, sometimes it's okay to give up, but more often than not, again, the more dragons that you're giving up, the less likely you are to want to give up 1 dragon. However, say that you got the first dragon and now you're slightly weaker than the opponents and you want to get a bit more gold under yourself and you maybe have a gold bounty on the turret. Well, then instead of going for the second dragon, you could be like, okay, it's fine. We'll just go down a dragon. We'll be even dragons now. We'll give them 1. And on the other side of things, we can go to the other side of the map. We can take a turret, get the gold bounty up the turret. We can take their jungle caps on that side of the map and just get a lot of gold under ourselves. So sometimes you can make the conscious decision to give up an objective in order to get something on the opposite side of the map. You just have to make sure that in the mid game when you're trading these objectives, you're gaining something valuable of hopefully equal value, but sometimes it's going to be a bit less value if you are already behind and you just kind of have to take what you can get rather than taking a fight that you know you're going to lose on the dragon or something. Okay, so the next kind of question that I feel will be common is who should I play towards in the mid game? Who should I be helping out in all of those scenarios? And typically, just as the early game, you want to play around the stronger people in your team. So if you have someone performing really well, who's, you know, like your ADC, your Vayne or whatever, they're performing really well, continue to play towards them when you can. When you're farming the other side of the map that they're not on, farm that side really quickly and then go back to their side of the map. And then when you farm the side that they're on, that's when you want to stick around a bit longer, look to help them out, look to use their strength to invade, to help gank them, to get them further ahead. Do not waste your time on your bad players. Simply put, when you have 1 or 2 bad players who are feeding, ignore them and play towards your stronger people in these parts of the game. When all of your teammates are feeding, make sure that you're valuing your own farm and getting yourself ahead. So basically just identifying the strong points of your team. Hopefully there's more than just you, and try to value their gold over maybe the people who aren't playing as well. Additionally, you want to value harder these people's gold when you're playing a tankier champion like a Vi, like a Jarvan, like a Rammus, a Nunu. You want to value their gold more sometimes than your own. But if you're playing a carry champion like Camille, like Kha'Zix, you're going to value your own farm in these parts of the game harder and value getting yourself ahead and snowballing yourself harder. Okay, so next I want to talk about the differences between playing from ahead and behind. So when you're behind in a game, there's a ton of factors to take into account. So initially, paying attention to the scaling of your team when you are behind. So if you're behind, but your team scales much better and is much stronger in the late game, well, then you mostly want to value farming and getting yourself just, you know, not falling further behind, waiting for the objective to spawn, and then really valuing those objective fights and hopefully getting the steals on the objectives. Now, if you're a team that's behind and you don't scale especially well, and you even just have maybe just equal scaling to the opponents, well, then you want to take more risks in these scenarios. The reason you want to take more risks in these scenarios is because you can already accept the fact that you're probably going to lose a game, and with that in mind, you now want to make more aggressive, risky plays. Maybe when a dragon spawns, you want to just go for the Baron and try to trick the enemy, and they won't realize you're on the Baron, and maybe you get a free Baron or something. Just taking these risky plays, thinking of, you know, smart, random things to make, making the game more volatile, and trying to just do whatever you can to maybe turn the game around. Now, on the other side of things, if you are very behind in a game, or rather very ahead in a game, well then in those scenarios, you want to be taking the guaranteed plays. You want to be going for the objectives. You want to be fighting when you know that you have the number advantage. You want to only be invading the enemy when you have the number advantage, when you have more people. Now, in that same light, though, you want to create these advantages where you have the number advantage. So, for example, if I can ping the enemy blue buff and try to invade them since we have the advantage, we can fight on that blue buff if I'm able to get my team to go there because we're stronger, so I know that creating that fight is going to be more likely for us to win as long as we have an equal amount of people in that fight. So just overall, taking more risks when you're behind and playing more safe and making more guaranteed plays when you are ahead. Okay, so now kind of transitioning to the later parts of the game. So initially I want to talk about the first Baron spawn. So when Baron first spawns, it is weak. It's not actually that hard to kill. It only has 9,900 health and the resistances are lower, I believe. And just in general, it's not that hard to take, and it's not really a game losing objective yet. Whether or not you win or lose this first Baron, if you get it really early on, is going to give you a big advantage, but not completely game losing. So valuing this, you can be a bit more risky when you're taking this. You don't always have to have a huge number advantage, but at the same time, there is some important things to take into account with Baron. The way I kind of think about Baron is that it's basically an extra person. So if I have 4 people alive and the enemy has 3 people alive, if I take Baron, it's basically just going to be a 4v4 is kind of how I think about it. So typically I want to take the Baron when I have 2 people, you know, difference, or when the enemy jungler is alive, or rather is dead. So if I'm able to kill enemy jungler, then we can guarantee that we can get the Baron, or if we have a 2-person or more advantage. Those are the times where I want to be taking the Baron. Okay, so we talked about Barons and when we want to take Barons. Now let's move on to the Elder Dragon. The Elder Dragon spawns at 18 minutes and is an extremely game-changing objective. This allows you to pretty much win any fight because it gives you that execute and extra damage, which is just extremely valuable in pretty much every scenario. So as soon as this Elder Dragon spawns, you're almost always going to want to be contesting it nearly every single scenario. Once you get that Elder Dragon, if you do get it, what you want to do is go for the Baron and obviously use that Elder Dragon advantage to get the Baron and then end with the Baron and Elder together. It's going to make it very easy to end the game when you have both of those buffs combined. On the other hand, if you lose this Elder Dragon fight, well then what you're going to have to do is try to stall out the game as long as possible. So if you do think that there's a possibility of stealing the Baron, you can go towards the Baron. However, if you think there's no chance of stealing the Baron, rather than wasting your time on the Baron, what you want to do instead is go push out other lanes as they go towards the Baron. Because when they're clearing the Baron, if you push all the lanes towards their turrets, it'll take them much longer to end the game. Because again, once you lose a Baron, once you lose an Elder Dragon, your goal should be to stall until that Elder Dragon or that Baron is gone. And the easiest way to do this is to deny them access to your turrets by pushing these waves. Okay guys, and the final thing we're going to talk about is the utilization of both Baron and Elder Dragon. So first off, with the Baron, typically the way you use Baron is you push about 2 lanes, and as the jungler, your job is to hover in between these lanes and give support to whatever lanes that are needed. So after farming here, you can see I'm going to go with my teammates who are pushing the mid and the bot lane, and then I'm going to hover in between them so that I can help out whoever needs help. Now in this scenario, I expect it to be more likely that my mid lane needs help, so I'm okay with getting a bit of farm and then running over to the mid lane. Now you can see as the wave starts to approach the turrets. So right when the wave is approaching the turrets, I'm there to protect my teammates in any way I can. Whether it's the mid lane, the bot lane, whoever is pushing, I'm there to kind of just protect them. Your job is typically not to split push by yourself as the jungler in most scenarios. It's more just hovering, making sure your teammates are safe, kind of threatening the engages like I'm doing here, just making sure that they're easily able to get through. So that's mainly how you want to use the Baron in most scenarios, to end games just like this one, very cleanly, very smooth, just hovering between multiple lanes, allowing your split pushers and your teammates to push the side lanes, and just doing exactly like what I did here. Okay guys, and finally using the Elder Dragon. So in this case right here, we have the Elder Dragon and the Baron is about to spawn. This is typically what you want. You want to use the Elder Dragon to get the Baron. Now you don't always just straight up go for the Baron, especially not in a game like this where I'm against a Nunu who has very, very good smiting. Instead, we're going to bait the Baron and then we're going to turn off of the Baron and go and try to force a fight here. So again, we have the Elder Dragon, meaning we can force whatever fight we want and win easily. We hover around the Baron so that we either get the Baron or they contest us at Baron, and really our goal is to fight and try to end the game through fighting. So once again, you saw we killed a couple people. Now we go and try to turn on to the Baron. Now we end up getting another kill, but we're still going to go turn on to the Baron here and look for that. Again, just utilizing this Elder Dragon, trying to fight when you can, and using that to get Baron, and then using that Baron once you do end up securing it to really end the game. So that's exactly what we did here. That's exactly why we win this game. Utilizing that Elder, then getting the Baron straight after, or forcing a fight by baiting onto the Baron. Alright guys, that's going to be it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. Again, this was just a jungle guide on basically everything that I find important about the jungle, the most important things I think you guys need to know to succeed. I plan on making these types of videos for every single role. This next week, we're going to be grinding top lane, trying to get a top lane guide out for you guys as soon as possible. Now, I do work during the weekend, and my school is also starting this week, so I might not be able to get that top lane guide out to you in a week, but I would say minimum like 2 weeks. I'll try to get it out by 2 weeks or less. Let me know what you guys thought about the video. If you think I should change anything for future guides, let me know if you have other questions about jungle that you feel I didn't answer in this video. I can try to answer them in the comment section below. I did put a lot of effort in this video, so if you wouldn't mind liking it, that would be great, and I'll see you guys in the next video.